Right. Hey, everybody, it's Richard Harris and Scott Leese again with another edition of the Surf and Sales podcast. Super excited for this guest. His name is Kevin Gaither. He's currently the SVP of Sales at Zip Recruiter. I've known Kevin for, gosh, I guess about 7 or 8 years now. And we've watched each other's careers grow. We've called each other for advice on things from time to time. So Kevin, thanks for coming on. We're really excited to talk to you.
Thanks for having me on. I'm really happy to help and share.
Yeah. So, the goal of this, I'd love before we even get into, sort of the growth mode, because that's the thing we want to talk about is, for context, what kinds of sales cycles have you worked with over your career? Are they 9-month sales cycles? Are they transactional? Have you done them all? Like what's your, just so people have perspective.
Yeah, I have done them all. I've been in them all, but I've gravitated towards what people mostly now refer to as high velocity sales, where you're talking, 6 to maybe 20 sales in a month. It's not like, hey, I do 5 deals a day. That, to me, I look at that as high transaction volume. But very much done the enterprise sales where it's 9-month sales cycles and a long time to wait for a commission check for these big deals. But I feel like where the sweet spot is for me is the high velocity selling that has become.
And you see that different than transactional sales, right? You see that different than the 1 to 3 call, and nothing against it, but the Yelp call, right? Like you see it as some those different things.
I do. The fundamentals still occur, but in a very shorter period of time, and usually lower dollar amounts. But absolutely.
Do you think it's the time it takes that defines high velocity versus transactional, or the size financially?
I think it's part size, it's part your buyer persona and your customer profile, and of course, it's very much your product. There's salespeople, as we all know, over at GoDaddy, and it's just every couple of calls they're nailing a sale, and you're still doing some discovery, but the product value, $100 maybe. So it's a combination of the product, the buyer persona, the length of time. There's a lot of things that play into that, but to me, it's mostly the product side.
What is it about you and your personality that makes this type of arena the one that you love to play in the most?
I grew up playing sports, man, and I like to win, and the real long game of enterprise sales is something that we're good at, and I understand how to win at enterprise sales. In fact, we're doing it quite well at Zip Recruiter. But I like the idea of 6 times a month, 20 times a month, I'm getting that positive reinforcement. Hitting singles and doubles as opposed to always trying to go for home runs. I played lacrosse in college, and it's like there's 20 goals a game in lacrosse. I'm like, that's right on. I love that as opposed to.
Scott, you just your long lost twin brother.
I know he's my older brother for sure.
More too.
I played sports, my whole life as well, and I've often described it as I wanted to go to work every day feeling like I had the opportunity to win, and I would have that high from closing a deal, at least one deal. And if I didn't close a deal, I literally wanted the pain and the agony of losing that particular day. So every day I wanted to feel like game day on some level. And it's difficult for me even now, even as I've moved way up market. It's difficult for me now to kind of grapple with like, well, gonna move this deal from stage 47 to 48 over a 12-month kind of cycle. I can't. It's hard for me to get up for that kind of fight.
Hey, Scott, I have
a question about
it. Scott, you're the closest I know to doing very much what Kevin's done. Would you agree with his definition of sort of the difference between high velocity and transactional? There's something different, or do you still see them as the same, or just out of curiosity, like, what do you think?
Well, I don't think that they're as different as Kevin does, if I'm understanding his definition right, and maybe I'm not. But you know, I wrote a book that was kind of focused on transactional sales, based on a lot of my early experience in my career. And you know, the average rep would do about 8 to 10 deals a month. The really good rep would do about 20 deals a month. And I called that transactional sales. Now, did that mean I used the wrong term? I don't know. Maybe I used the wrong term. So just feel kind of the same to me. And it was certainly more of a, you know, let's make 50 to 100 kind of calls a day environment, and maybe we get 1 or 2 deals a day. But I can understand what Kevin means. If you're GoDaddy and you make 5 phone calls and you close 1 deal every 5 phone calls, it's like shooting fish in a barrel, right? That's a different kind of beast right there. I don't even know what I would barely even call that selling, to be honest with you.
You know, one of the things I've observed after, you know, doing what I'm doing, as we've done it for as long as we've done it, you know, the 3 of us, is that there's gurus who write blog posts and books, but there's no real definitive guide that people go to and say, well, here you go. This is the definitive guide to B2B selling with all the definitions that's in a textbook that people study in college and things like that. So there's no question about it. And you know what? Potato. You know, we're doing deals, and we're doing it faster than we are in 9-month sales cycles. And I think you and I would agree, though, that even if it's a deal a day to keep your boss away, you're still following a lot of the fundamentals of sales. The discovery is quicker. The way that you negotiate, it's quicker. They happen faster, but that doesn't mean that the fundamentals of sales don't apply if you're doing 5 deals a day or 1 deal a quarter, or 20 deals in a month.
Yeah.
All I can say is that what I've experienced and what's been good, what I feel like is a sweet spot for me is that high velocity sale. But if somebody wants to call it transactional.
Yeah. Here's a question for you that I've run into through my recruiting and building and scaling these organizations, both in a mid-market enterprise sale as well as the transactional kind of arena. I have found that it is far easier to take somebody from a transactional environment and move them up market and kind of file down their shark teeth, so to speak, than it is to take somebody who's from an enterprise sale and put them in a transactional market and try to teach them how to be a shark. You're nodding your head. I feel like you agree with me.
All these names, Scott, are going through my head of when I tried to convert people, because ultimately what I found is that these people who were used to longer sales cycles would get into the role, and then as we started to have those inevitable performance conversations, they would then say, I really am more used to developing long-standing relationships with these people, and the and all the excuses that come with that. But I certainly can tell you from real deep personal experience that going the other direction and taking somebody that is highly transactional, but also very coachable, and putting them into the enterprise environment with the longer sales cycle, that certainly can work. I'm not saying that that's a certainty, but I have observed what you have observed. And in fact, as far as in my checklist, in the recruiting checklist, like just the basic yes, no questions is, tell me about the job that you've done. In fact, you can envision a grid in your mind. I've got their last 3 jobs and the similar questions, and I can rapid fire go through it. Hey, at the last job, what was the sales cycle? How many deals a month did you do? What was your average order value? Okay, great. Next job before that. And I go through the same questions. And if the pattern is long sales cycles, 2 deals a month, it's like, this isn't going to be a good fit for you when I'm asking you to go knock down 12 sales a month. You're going to be whining and moaning about how you don't develop these long, deep standing relationships and get to know their cat.
Yeah. You're muted, Richard.
As you bring up sort of your recruitment process, and I know you, Kevin, like you long before Zip Recruiter, you were always about interviewing and good interview skills. And I remember talking to you a long time ago about that stuff. Now that you have sort of found your niche, right? You found where you are. What are the things aside from sales cycle, aside from, you know, previous experience that you look for in a rep at this sort of, you know, well, not sort of, but at this high velocity, you know, 10 to 12 to 15 deals a month kind of thing? What are those traits you're looking for?
I actually don't look for anything special about a rep in transactional versus high velocity versus enterprise in particular. And I've written about this. People can go, you know, look this up. I'm looking for drive, and drive is broken into three major components: need for achievement, competitiveness, and optimism. Anybody can go search for my name and those characteristics. You'll see how I've written about that quite a bit, spoken about that quite a bit. If I have those three things, need for achievement, competitiveness, and optimism, I've got a salesperson that I can work with. I want somebody who's organized, highly organized, especially in a high velocity sales model where you're juggling a pipeline that's going to have maybe 60 opportunities in it. You've got to be highly organized, highly coachable. But the main characteristics I'm always looking for, Richard, is need for achievement, competitive, and optimism. And collectively, I call those drive. What I was saying before, of course, is in my checklist, though, I've got drive. Yep, you're driven. But have you been in roles that are similar to this role? Because guess what? Unlike mutual funds in the stock market, past performance can almost certainly guarantee future results.
I've got a follow-up question or two on your kind of definition of drive. Maybe one is more of a statement. So I don't disagree that the salesperson needs to be super, super organized. What I find a bit funny and ironic is how fucking disorganized and scattered most salespeople are. Like, this is not a skill set that comes naturally to a lot of salespeople.
No question.
And I have often said, you want to separate yourself on a sales floor and kind of move into management and continue going up in your career. Be really organized. Mm-hmm. And that's really hard for some salespeople.
No question.
How do you teach people who are not naturally organized like that to kind of calm down and slow down their mind and get their shit together, right? Can you talk a little bit and expand on that a little bit for me?
Yeah. So, well, first thing, I can, again, the names of people just start flowing through my head of people that I found that were so organized, and Salesforce was so well, just, everything looked fantastic. Pre-call planning, wow, amazing pre-call planning. And they would never get on the friggin' phone. So no doubt.
Those are the kind of people that some reps should just hire as their like data dungeon assistant. They probably produce at a totally different level.
Yeah,
right?
No question about that. In fact, one of the things I did at business.com way back when was actually separated that role out, and I had people that were just those data entry people to like fill it in. But so look, zebras don't change their stripes. If somebody's going to be highly disorganized, they're always going to be highly disorganized. And so when the environment that we try and put them into is one where we hold them accountable to their pipeline and understanding their pipeline. And in fact, like a broken record, and when I run pipeline meetings, now with my sales team at scale, I'm asking the same damn questions about decision-making process, timing. Hey, that close date there, is that their close date or your hopeful close date? And I've been doing that since 2001, like a broken friggin' record. And of course, what do I expect to see, Scott? I expect to see what they say in Salesforce. So it's just a matter of when we go through the discipline, it's like, this is what I expect to see. Granted, their desk looks like absolute mayhem, for sure.
The car's a mess.
Yeah,
right?
you know, where's their playbook? I don't know. Playbook someplace else.
Yeah.
You know, who knows? Dog ate their homework.
And my follow-up question has to do with optimism. And I'm curious how you define that. I have my own definition that I've crafted for myself. So my family is from Buffalo, Niagara Falls, New York, historically. Okay. So if you know anything about Western New York, we just don't deserve nice things. And we're eternally like, you know, negative or bitch and moan and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of my friends, Richard probably included, would accuse me of being pessimistic.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that I'm pessimistic. I think that I'm a near-term pessimist and a long-term optimist.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning I feel like the sky is falling immediately around me, but I know I'm going to be okay in the end. So I'm curious how you're kind of vetting for optimism in salespeople and what they're and just how you're defining it, because what you don't want is a sales team full of hopium that thinks every deal is going to come in, right? And is blowing smoke. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So let me back up a little bit. Okay. I feel like my job is to make sure to temper the positivity and optimism with the objective questions to understand whether or not, you know, they're, you know, overly optimistic. Okay. Now let's back up to the definition. I'm looking for people that have thick skin. Okay. They're resourceful. They're going to go up, over, under, through things regardless. They've been told no, and they're still going to persist. One person says no, they're going to call 5 other people on that sphere of influence, regardless of the fact that they said no. In fact, I think of this woman, her name is Alicia Andrade. All these names start going through my head. She got crushed on a call, hung up on a call, and she literally stood up, looked over the cube next, and I was her manager. She looked over the cube and she went, KG, I guess I'm just going to call somebody else. It's their problem, not mine. And I thought, my God, you like demonstrate this, like you exude this optimism that you're going to, you know, win. There's no question about it. Thick skin. Because let's look at it this way. Scott, if you and I had a sales force filled with Debbie Downers, people that didn't believe that they can do it. Oh my God, you know, whatever.
Can't have that.
Correct. So I can't have that.
Yeah.
But I want people that are going to believe that they can win, that they can persist, that 1, 2, 3, 10 no's, and that's fine. I'm just going for yes, eventually. I'll get there eventually. I can deal with that. I can't deal with the Debbie Downer. So during the interview process, I'll ask questions that'll sound something like this. Scott, tell me about the last time you lost a sale. I know you're a superstar, but I know you lose sales from time to time. Tell me about the last time that you lost a sale. You'll start telling me about this sale. Then I'll ask, Scott, what did you do next? And what they do next is the most important thing in understanding where their level of optimism. Did they have to go outside and smoke 2 cigarettes? Did they pull 10?
Don't get me started on that.
Right? Did they have to go pull 10 people into the snack break room to talk about how crappy it was? They lost this deal and our product sucks, our price is too high. Did they go running into their boss's office to bitch and moan? Or did they go running into their boss's office to say, hey, I lost a sale. I can't talk right now. I got to get back on the phone, but I want to debrief on this sale and how I can do better. But I'm going to get back on the phone right now. And I'm going to go, you know, crush some more sales. Let's just make a note of that. That's really, really important. Another question that we'll ask is, tell me about the last time your boss gave you feedback, negative feedback about your performance. And just like the last question, Scott, the most important thing is, what did you do next? What did you do about that? I told you that you just screwed the pooch. Okay.
Yeah.
What did you do about that? Did you go run to HR, or did you go download a bunch of books in Audible to make yourself better and develop a development plan with your boss to get better at that and hold yourself accountable? What did you do next? And there's a whole series. In fact, if anybody wants to go dig online, they could literally go find all these interview questions that I ask. And in the history of this, I have only had one salesperson that told me they downloaded all my questions, wrote out answers, and were prepared for an interview. So I dare anybody that wants to go do that, go right ahead.
I hope they just type them up and email them ahead of time at this point, right? It's
Yeah,
2020.
here you go.
Like, hey Kevin, here's just I don't want you to ask me the same stuff.
Yeah,
Dig
right.
deep, Kevin, right?
Right.
Prove to
Right.
me. So I've just been sitting back here for the last few minutes, and I'm just watching the two of you fall in love. Like, it's so fun. So, I've known you guys for so long, and you guys get along, and I know one day Scott's waiting you to have a big exit and go hire him, because you would be the kind of boss who would be like, Scott, go do it. I know you know how to do this. Like, just make it happen.
Are you kidding me? I've inherited so many of Scott's reps. I think I'm gonna have to cut him in on.
Every time Kevin has said so far during the podcast, every time he said these names are going through my head, I'm thinking to myself, I know exactly what names you're talking about.
Yeah, the same ones. Yeah, exactly.
So Kevin, step back a little bit before coming out of this stuff. And I want to come back to the interviewing stuff, because I know you are a guru on that stuff.
Thank you.
But like, were you the kid, aside from playing sports, were you always sort of business minded? Were you the one who had a lemonade stand or doing stuff, or where did the money part come in for you?
Let me tell you, man, no one ever told me that I should ever be in sales. In fact, going door to door and selling for the Boy Scouts and my baseball teams, the chocolate bars and all this kind of stuff, scared the living daylights out of me. Same. I had no interest in being in sales. Asking strangers for money, are you freaking kidding me? Scared the daylights out of me. But I'll tell you, when I took my first job out of school, I was at a mutual fund company, and at the time we were in a mini recession, and so I took whatever job I could get, $10 an hour, headset on, customer service, 1-800-DIAL-BEN, how can I help you? And what I realized very quickly was that the person sitting next to me made $1 per hour more than he did, more than I did, and that drove me up the wall. And I said, well, why do you make more money than I make? And he said, well, because I've just been here longer. Well, meanwhile, I had tested higher than he did. I was training people in the job, and he was not training people in the job. And I thought, wait a minute. So I got to wait till the end of the year to like get some money to get better than this person. That's ridiculous. And then I ultimately ended up getting the largest raise in the department. And that was a 9% raise off of $10 an hour. And I thought, that's a load of baloney. What can I do to control my destiny and control my income? Because by the way, what was driving that right there? Competitiveness. It drove me nuts that this guy who wasn't nearly as good as me, sitting right next to me, was making more money than me because his butt had been in the seat longer. I wanted to get paid for the work that I put in. So I said, I need to get into sales. And my parents, it was as if they saw like a truck coming at my head. They're like, no, don't get into sales. What if you missed your quota? What if this? What if this? And I just said, I can't not be in sales. I have to do this, because it's either start my own business, which I didn't have the guts or the money to do, or get into sales and earn money based on the work that I put in. And the very first commission check I received in my entire career in 1994 was $19,000, and I was hooked. I was hooked.
That's your first commission check?
Yeah, 19 grand. And I bought myself a 30-inch television. I bought myself a 30-inch tube television set and put the rest away, because I was like, I'm never closing a deal ever again.
Talk to us a little bit about, you've scaled, what's the smallest team you've managed? What's the largest team you've managed? What's that like?
Smallest team was probably about 4 or 5 people. It was a couple of salespeople and some SDRs. Largest sales team, about 500 plus people.
Talk to us about that. Like, I know you've been at Zip Recruiter a while, and as you think about different things, what are the things you learned going from 5 reps to 20 to 50, 50 to 100, 100 to 2, like just in general terms, like what's?
Yeah.
What's
So,
that take?
this is where I thank my lucky stars that I did not grow up with people saying, KG, you got the gift of gab, you should be in sales. Because everything that I've had to do in my entire career, regardless of the size of sales teams that I have been fortunate to lead, I had to learn. I had to learn things. And way back when I first got into leadership, the one thing that I learned was that I'm ultimately extremely lazy and would like to go on vacations from time to time. And, and so it doesn't matter if you lead a 4-person sales team or a 504-person sales team. I always have to, and this is going to sound morbid, so viewers, listeners, forgive me. The way I think about things is if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, or if my manager got hit by a bus tomorrow, would this team continue? Or am I some sort of a bottleneck? And in fact, the smaller the sales team, the more critical that is, because the tendency to be the bottleneck in certain circumstances can be more prevalent when the team is small, because you can kind of just sort of get away with it. But you are not setting yourself, I learned the lesson the hard way, you're not setting yourself up for future success and scale. Like when the company is ready to scale fast and you don't have a system that's ready to scale, now you got to take your 4-person team to your 10-person team, 20-person team, but you don't have your recruiting processes set up. You don't have your onboarding process set up. You don't have your pipeline review set up. You don't have your sales process. You don't have Salesforce set up. You don't have your performance review process set up. These are all things that it doesn't matter if you have 4 people or 504 people, you've got to do that. So answer the question, if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, what would fall apart? And in fact, here's your pro tip. Do go on a vacation. Do turn off your email. And when you come back, identify what went wrong. What went wrong? And tell your team, I'm turning off my email, but you've got my mobile. So call me if there's something that is dramatic.
In fact, if you go on vacation, and I wonder if this has happened to you, because I've gone on vacation before, and sales have gone up when I've been away. And I've got the texts and the phone calls like, hey, Scott, you should just fucking stay gone, dude. We're better without you. And I'm like, well, it seems to me that I've built a team that is able to survive me getting hit by a bus, which means I must be pretty good at what I do.
1,000%. Look, let me just tell you, there was a guy that I was trying to coach, probably about 8 years ago, who was that bottleneck. I saw that he was the bottleneck, and I kept telling him, you are a problem for this business. You'd better figure out how to not be the bottleneck. And you know what he said to me? He said, when I'm the bottleneck, I've created job security because everything comes through me. And I said, dude, you could not be more wrong. You could not be more wrong, because that means he doesn't trust the people. He doesn't trust processes. Everything has to go through him. And
they don't trust him.
That's right.
Trust him,
That's right.
So.
And in short order, Richard, he was removed from his job. And guess what? The person that came on created scalable systems for this, that, and the other. And some people just, like I said, zebras don't change their stripes. Some people just won't. They won't be coachable and listen to that. But again, but no doubt about it. Like, 4 people, 4 salespeople, and that's great. You get to know them very, very well, and you develop a real deep connection. Unfortunately, at scale, those kinds of deep connections don't happen at the same level. But what I've learned is that the check-ins, if you will, with your sales teams and being present with your sales teams is actually becomes a really important piece of the job as a leader of a very, very large team. There was a guy that I met who led Citrix GoToMeeting, and he had something like 600 salespeople over 4 different call centers across the United States. And he was traveling like you wouldn't believe. They were all inside sales teams, no outside sales teams, all inside sales. And I asked him the question that people ask me all the time. You have all these inside salespeople. What the hell are you traveling so much for? And he goes, KG, my job now at this level is in part about presence. It's about going into those offices. It's about sitting down on the floor next to a salesperson and providing them that shoulder to shoulder coaching to let them know that you are there and that you care and that you're not just some, nice picture on the annual report or or on the, leadership page. They really get to see KG sat down next to me and I got off a call and KG gave me coaching on that call or helped me with something in particular. And that's actually been really hard for me because I'm used to rolling up my sleeves and, getting things done in particular and not just being like in part that person of presence.
Yeah.
But
so
it's
how do you deal with that? And this ties into something that we touched on before we started recording. Kevin's over here getting faxes, getting deals. That's how old school he is.
Yes, exactly.
Jesus Christ, Kevin, you're
Hey,
older than. Are you older than Richard? Is that a fax machine going off? What is happening?
My VCR still flashes 12, by the way, too. I don't even know.
How do you? So this has been my challenge. Like,
Scott, more importantly, no, I'm a year older than Kevin, I think.
Okay, that's good. That's good. This is one of my challenges is like once I get to around 500 people in the company, I feel like I struggle to continue to make an impact because my presence is not as important or as needed. And also, like, I can't go to all the offices anymore. And I have to be kind of anchored at HQ. And so my whole career, like, I've had 6 jobs as a VP of sales. 5 of them, I would say, were successful to very successful. All of them were 2.5 to 3 years, except for the one that was a miss. But you've been where you're at for 6 years and gone beyond that threshold. But I just heard you talk about the difficulty of, like, stepping back a little bit and not being able to make that kind of same impact. How have you dealt with that? I need you to teach me right now.
Well, first of all, no question it's hard. Number 2, I continue to hiring my leadership is, of course, incredibly hard to get that right. And of course, what I'm trying to create is these, how do I create my playbook and not permeate, but like get my playbook distributed through the leadership such that that they are an extension of me. But honestly, man, there's a little bit of letting go, and I've had to learn that. There's a little bit of letting go and trusting.
Letting go of what though, Kevin? Letting go of what?
The day-to-day types of things. Okay. So when the day-to-day types of things. So I'm not paying attention at the granular level to the talk time or the impact calls from one particular team or another. I'm looking at the inputs and the outputs at the broader scale, but knowing that
I'm trying to give the listeners like, inputs and outputs at a broader scale. Like, you get to this team of 400 or 500 people. What does that mean?
Yeah, so I stole this one from Salesforce.com and some of their leadership over there. Even the great Salesforce.com focuses on activities, meetings, and pipeline. If we're looking at just results charts, like driving and looking in the rearview mirror all at the same time. That just looking at the results charts. But activities, meetings, pipeline. What's that? What's that input that goes in it? So that's the input and the outputs there. But now I don't know the names. To that. And there is a difference, and I actually coach CEOs on this particular topic. There's a difference between the delegation and the abdication. Okay, and I think that the VP of Sales, Scott, that will listen to this and likely fail are the ones that are they're like, hey, here's what we need to do. It's real simple. Just hire managers from our industry. They should know what they're doing. And let's just let them be them. Let them do them. Let me just say, I screwed that up 6 ways to Sunday. 6 ways to Sunday, I messed that up because I made those assumptions and they were wrong. And so that's when I learned the real critical difference between abdication and delegation. Abdication is Okay, just you run you just run your show. The delegation is about, hey, this is my vision for my team. When we're in the KG system, this is how we operate. We're talking about scale. We're talking about accountability. We're talking about, you know, a whole variety of things in that way. And unfortunately, it's going to sound odd, but, you know, I need to get everybody, you know, singing out of the same hymnal. Because I've made that mistake to where it's like, well, this manager, they have their own way of doing it. And then they have this manager, and then there I am in HR's office talking about how this manager has just gone AWOL and they're doing this one thing because we're trying to terminate a rep over here on a different team who's being held to a different accountability standard. Man, have I learned that lesson the wrong way. So again, that's the difference, Scott, between the, you know, the accountability and the delegation and abdication. But I feel you. I don't know if I've cracked the code, Scott, on how to.
You're still there, going on year 6 or whatever. So you've cracked it more than me. We've cracked it more than me. Let's just leave it at that.
So your tenure, and we were joking about this a little bit earlier. You know, you've been at Zip Recruiter 6 years in a sales leadership capacity, growing and those kinds of things.
Yes.
The average tenure's 18 months.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
What are you doing right? Where are you keeping your mouth shut? What do you think you're doing? I'm sure some of it has to do even with your own leadership, but what advice do you have for those, you know, those VPs of sales who are like, I can't get past this 18-month, maybe 2 years, but I sure as hell never get to 4 years.
Yeah. You know, I would tell you, well, okay. So I feel like I'm motivated by like, you know, fear and greed, like all at the same time. Like I want to win and I want more. And I don't mean greed, like in like, just the money. Like I want to win. I want to win. I want to win. But man, I am shit scared because I know there's somebody right behind me who can take my job and who's learned something new that's going to be better. And so I am, you know, constantly reading books, listening to podcasts, well, actually I consume books on Audible, so I'm not reading, you know, books or what have you. But continuing to learn best practices. And in fact, I have a new boss actually at Zip Recruiter. And one of the things that I said to him was, you know, you may think that things are going great because the charts are going up and to the right severely and fantastically. But the way that I look at it is, yes, but I see under the covers and I see all the things that represent the areas for improvement and the things that we can do wrong. And by the way, that's how I state them. I state them as areas for improvement. I sniff these things out to make them better myself. The problem ends up being, and I know this because my peers, you know, it's like, Jesus, every year they're just changing jobs, you know. They don't go sniffing those things out. And in fact, oftentimes they try and everything's fine. Don't worry, everything's fine. And in fact, I encourage my leadership. Tell me when there's these problems. And so I think that a demonstration of seeking out these problems myself, recognizing that we can be so much better, and incrementally making improvements, you know, to our business on a regular basis.
You go looking for, like, do you go look for job description stuff in the job description, stuff in the interview like what kind of problems are you seeking out so that you can say, hey, I think we should get better? Or is it at this stage where you've got enough managers where you can say, hey guys, what are your 3 biggest problems? Let's see if we can figure out how to fix them. Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, that way too. But I'm a huge fan of skip checks. Huge fan of skip checks. Sorry?
What is that?
Yeah, sorry, I'm using vernacular. So I'm skipping past my management to go right to where I think the source of a problem is. Instead of you know, waiting for the distillation, I'm going to go right to the source of the problem. So for example, literally in the last 60 days, I conducted 44 30-minute interviews with people on a team where I thought that there was a problem. And I went past my VPs, past my directors, past my frontline managers, and was speaking directly to a source. And I compiled 84 pages of notes, and I'm compiling those myself to identify where those problems were. I wanted to hear it myself.
That's 22 hours, Richard, if you're trying to do math over there.
I know how to do math. Come on,
Okay.
Scott.
I mean, he did go to Arizona. Let's not fault him for that.
That's why I'm asking if he knows how to do math.
Scott went to
Arizona,
ASU.
if he went to Arizona State, Kevin, he'd be able to do math.
You'd think. So, but anyway, my point is that let me just say, that's a huge pain in my ass. That is a huge pain, a lot of time that I'm investing, but I was seeking something in particular. And the good news is that I identified five things that were in our control that we could fix about the hiring process, about our proposal process that was slower than it needed to be. I identified leadership that I needed to remove. I identified I hope 5 things, because I went straight to the source. And guess what? Guess what our Q2 objectives and key results are around.
Right.
But I went straight to the source myself.
How do you then and again, look, you've been somewhere for 6 years, so your managers shouldn't be shocked by you doing this, right? But how do you overcome that? Hey man, is he disrespecting me? Am I on the chopping block? Like, how do you manage your managers that, hey, this is a good thing? Mm-hmm. Like, how do you do that? Because I think that would be very scary for some heads of sales.
Ladies and gentlemen, a tap dance. Like this is where when I'm talking to my managers that I'm going to do this, it's a very sensitive conversation. And the way I'm positioning it is, look, we agree that we want to make things better. I want to find out, the truth straight from the source. Would it be okay if? And there's never a time. And never a time where I get a manager who goes, no, you can't talk to my reps or my managers or whatever it might be. And because I position it as, look, let's get better. We want to get better. There's challenges, there's problems. At Zip Recruiter, we talk about building a rocket ship attached to the Zip Recruiter rocket ship while it's in flight. Okay. So, and the Zip Recruiter, the rocket ship is the sales team attached to the Zip Recruiter enterprise. Generally speaking, we're both building the rocket ship while it's in flight, and we take an asteroid and a wrench to the head every once in a while, as we're doing it. But we're moving, okay. And people that come on board, they're drinking that same Kool-Aid. Look, we're building this thing together. We're building this thing together. We want to make it better. So I try my best to make sure that I'm not hiring people that aren't willing to, hear that feedback. But honestly, by hitting it right on the head with my leadership and saying, hey, Jane, is it okay if I go speak to your managers? Or Bob, can I go talk to your sales reps? And this is Bob, the VP. And I'm saying, I want to go all the way down and talk to the pro tip, by the way. Make sure you tell the sales reps that it's an okay and safe conversation. I've made that mistake where the sales reps are like, oh my God, the SVP wants to talk to me now. Is today my last day? I've made that mistake too. So you got to make sure. And
I think so. The biggest piece of this is, one, to do it, but the other piece is, and I know you, is very open communication. Mm-hmm. Let people know that you're doing it. Get their buy-in on it, right? Yeah. Don't do it behind their backs, right? Don't just sort of pick up the phone and do that. But that was really good. I'd never heard that sort of skip comment that you made. So I'm glad you shared that with us. That's cool.
It's incredibly powerful because it signals to my leadership, my boss, and all the C-level, the suite, when we're having conversations, here's what I'm doing to sniff out problems. And then I can develop the action plan. And I can assure you that in most organizations, most SVPs, most Cs, they're not doing skip checks on a consistent basis. So this actually then ends up looking like an amazing thing. It's time consuming. It's not difficult. It's time consuming. It's not difficult. And you'd be shocked at the great information that you'll get out of this, assuming that you live in a culture that is focused on areas for improvement. There are plenty of companies out there, Scott, Richard, you guys have come across them where people get slapped when there's problems. We
That's what Scott did to me when he hired me all the
That's
time.
what I used to do to Richard. Yeah.
Yeah. Still sometimes he does.
Because I was getting slapped.
Right.
One of the quotes that I love from my CEO, which really demonstrates what our culture is at ZipRecruiter in this particular topic: we never lose. We either win or we learn.
Right.
And great, fantastic.
So I know we're getting a little bit close to the end, but I forgot to bring this up at the beginning, is that, Kevin is the originator of shit my sales manager used to say. He taught
Really?
that to me. Yes. He taught, and I called him one day and I said, hey, do you mind if I start quoting on this stuff? Like, can I do this? He's like, go for it, man. Go for it. So Scott, you clearly didn't know. That's where I learned it from. Was from Kevin.
I didn't know that at all.
So what are your latest quotes from that?
They call them Gaitherisms. And at one of my last jobs, my leadership team actually put together a Google Doc of all the shit that Gaither says.
I have one of those. I've taken mine and done that. Like, I need to publish it.
Yeah, you should.
So,
Kevin, let me ask you 3 rapid fire questions in a row here.
Do it.
Can I do that?
Please.
Okay. Do you spend time training your sales organization and sales leadership team on equity and what it means and what they might earn and the implications of it all and all that kind of stuff? Or is that not a part of your purview?
I do it on an opportunistic basis because my team doesn't understand. Most people don't understand stock options, equity, RSUs. And I am fortunate enough to have come from the financial services business. So I actually have a better knowledge about stock options, generally speaking, and then, incentive stock options being something different. But I don't proactively produce content, but some of you two have probably heard me say this. My phrase, Scott, isn't always be closing. That's not my phrase. My phrase is always be helping. And so when people come on board, I tell them, I can help you in sales and sales leadership, but there's a whole bunch of other life things that I can help you with: goal setting and paying down credit cards and understanding stock options and what the hell 401ks are and retirement planning stuff. I can help with a lot of those things, which puts me in a different light as a mentor and a guide and advisor. So no, I do not have a standard deck where I go through what stock options are, but certainly when
can I be so bold as to encourage you to do that for your team?
Yeah.
I think some of us have a responsibility to try to bring some of the things that are in the shadows into the light.
Yeah,
that would be my ask of you.
Kevin, I would even tell you, if you're willing, I've seen Scott put this deck together that teaches people about it. He'll tame it down a little bit because there's a little bit of aggressiveness about, you're never going to become a billionaire as a BDR, which we all know. But I would tell you that Scott's done a really good job with it if you ever wanted somebody like that. Like, I think people, and anybody who's listening, Scott would love to come in and teach that to people. It's really good.
I love to learn.
Second question. Let's say you're going to go build a brand new sales organization, right now. What's the first hire that you make? I ask you this question because I've been asked this many times before, and I don't know that I've heard anybody have the same answer as me. And so since you're currently my older brother, and Richard is thinking that we're falling in love, I'm wondering if you're going to have the same answer as me.
Yeah, I suspect that we might vary, but all I can tell you is that what I have done when I've built teams is the first hire is a hunter. And I don't know if you would agree, with that, but that is what I have done in my career, for better or for worse. I hire a hunter, but then I look for, what's 20% of their time look like? 20-30% of their time is in, lead generation type of work. Great. Now my next hire is going to be a BDR or some sort of person to do lead research or something like that. But I'll start with the hunter first. Why? Because if I'm not hiring something that is revenue generating right out of the gate, there's going to be questions about what the hell I'm doing. and so I look for the revenue generation first, but I am so coachable, and I'm very interested in what your opinion is on that with the rapid fire question number 2.
Yeah, I actually hire a sales operations person because because I don't want to spend my time in the weeds building reports and
I would jump in, Scott, and say Kevin knows how to do that. Kevin will be the ops person for that hunter, because I know he's
of course he will. Of course he will. But he's nodding his head because it's not an efficient and effective use of his time.
I totally get it, and Scott, I go back and forth on this because an operations person, I cannot, and Richard and I have talked about this so crisply. It's hard for me to like tie specific revenue growth and revenue, and attribution to revenue generation to an ops head. And if y'all have pro tips for me on that, I'd love to talk offline about that. But that's fascinating. Your first hire would be an ops hire.
Yeah. Last question of the 3 rapid fire questions. Assuming this journey that you're on ends someday and ends positively and successfully and whatnot, what do you do next? What do you do next? No, I want to know. I mean, you've been super successful. You've built and scaled God knows how many sales organizations. Like, is there a next challenge? Can you see yourself going back to the beginning and doing the same thing over and over again? Or is there something different?
Yes. So, I've asked myself that quite a bit. And so I cannot see myself going to a, 10,000 person company and leading a big bureaucratic company. It would have to be very much in a pre-IPO startup type of environment where I can build, fix, and grow something. I mean, it's what I like to do. Here's a little fun fact for you, Scott. I graduated with a degree in architecture of all things. I started with a degree in aerospace engineering, but due to my social activities, failed calculus a few times. But the general motivator was I wanted to ideate on something, plan for something, build something, and then see the results of that build. Like a rocket taking off or a building on Park Avenue. These are the things that switch me on. And what I've learned is that being in startups, I get the opportunity to build, fix, and grow, and be able to ideate on something, plan for something, build it, and see it grow. Sometimes it's big, sometimes it's not so big, but I get the thrill of the building, which is probably why I don't hire the operations person first. But let's not go back to number 2. But remember, I said, the other thing that I like is helping people. I'm on this call and I like to share what I know. Advisory roles like you do, Scott, that switches me on, and I'd like to do a lot more of those. Board seats and helping companies, consulting, not to cut into Richard's business, but there's a lot to go around. There's a lot of business to go around. We have abundance around us.
You're not on enough boards, so don't worry about that.
But the idea of going to a large 10,000 person company, Scott, and being the CRO, that doesn't switch me on even in the slightest, because you know what I like to do, Scott, and I think you do too. I like to come in the morning and say, you know what, today we're gonna. And that ain't going to happen if I'm at a 10,000 person company, because it's like, well, today we're going to, but I'm going to have to talk to 10 other people and run it through legal and run it through HR. Oh, yeah. And make sure you check with Betty over there. That ain't my bag.
I can't do that. That's literally my hell.
So the next question is, Scott, at the end of this show, is Kevin going to get a rose? That might be the title of this episode: is does KG get a rose? So
oh my God, look, man, I hold Scott in high regard. I look up to Scott, so I don't know why the rose would go from Scott to me, man. Like he's demonstrated by the reps that have come to me that he is the bomb diggity, and I only look to aspire to the kinds of things that Scott has done time and time again at different companies. And that's not just hyperbole or BS. Remember, you and I have Scott Feinstein in common, somebody who I've known and trusted for a long, long time, who speaks very highly of you. So I should be sending the rose your way, man.
What can we do to help Kevin? How can we help you, your team, Zip? We always sort of like to turn around to your point. How can we be of help? How can we be of service to you?
Keep sharing best practices. Is there new things to learn. If there's some new techniques and somebody's able to figure out how do we tie operations to a revenue number, I'd love to, figure those things out.
Scott's got that, I think. Scott, you have that play, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, he does. Get in touch with Claire Morris and Scott Leese, and I guarantee you they will turn you on to how to make that happen.
Yeah, that'd be very helpful. Thank you for asking.
Of course. Well, man, this has been like this thing flew for an hour, man. This was awesome.
Yeah.
Really, really fun. Always as fun as a friend to get to see you and talk to you about stuff, but on a professional level, every time I talk to you, I'm just like, that's knowledge. So thank you for sharing your wisdom with us.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kevin.
Happy to help. Thanks for having me anytime.
We'll do it again soon.
Cheers. Enjoy your night.
You too.
Cheers.